speaking about that, let me just ask you about some of the top things that you look for in a company when you want to invest. Like, what are signs of a healthy company? You know, how important is the person behind the helm? Do you look at the CEO? Do you look at the management team? Like, what are the success factors, the big metrics that you look at, your big pillars before you, or your big boulders before you go down into more granular stuff?
So it massively depends on where the business is in its life cycle and how established it is. So CEOs make a huge difference in startups. Obviously, it's generally the founder. There are listed companies where the CEO makes very little difference, and there are listed companies where the CEO is absolutely critical, right? So, for example, in Meta at the moment, Mark Zuckerberg is quite clearly doing whatever he wants, like with the metaverse and everything else. He is the key guy there, and if you don't like him, you cannot possibly be a shareholder there. It's just how it is. But if you go and buy a stake in, Sanlam or Old Mutual or whatever the case may be, like, yes, the CEO obviously makes a difference, but the CEO is not going to wake up tomorrow and bet the farm on some exotic new thing. That's just not how that business works. Then you're looking at growth rates and valuation. So that's why I say it really depends whether you're looking at something that's very, very established and dare I say it, a bit boring and kind of just getting on with it, or something that's a bit more wild. Then management makes a big difference. Within management, in my previous advisory life, we had a client, he said something so profound, stayed with me forever. He said, in any business, there really are only three functions. One is business development, the second is operations, and the third is finance. That's it. You can put anything into one of those three buckets. And when he invests in something, he always looks at the CEO and figures out, okay, what is this CEO's strength? Ultimately, is he or she really good at sales, or like more of a financial person? Your typical scenario where a CA is the founder, or someone who's very strong operationally. He reckons most people can really only be good, like great at one, good at two, cannot be great at all three. It's just impossible. And then he looks for, the blind spot. So for me, for example, I'm good at business development and I'm good at the numbers. I'm extremely horrible at ops. I hate admin, truly hate admin. So my first formal hire in the business would need to be a COO. That's actually what I need. I need a chief get stuff done officer. That's my personal blind spot. Whereas, for you, Dylan, it might be someone very financially strong, because that may not necessarily be, a strength for you. And so the idea is to try and figure out what are my blind spots and then hire to fix them. Because otherwise you just end up hiring your strength and then you're paying someone else's salary to do what you should be doing anyway. So with management, that's important. And then the other stuff that obviously makes a business great, it's all the stuff like the product, the unit economics, which is how much you make for each additional product you sell. How well are you managing your expenses? Is the cash actually landing in the bank account? It doesn't help if you have all this great stuff and you can't generate cash flow. That's critical, obviously. Growth trajectory, how big can this thing get? And people forget about, the offshoots. Like, what can you add on to your existing brand or business that can actually give you a whole new way to grow versus just carrying on with what you're doing? I always think it's a lot easier to get the first 20% of an economic profit pool than it is to get the last 20% of the one you're already in. In other words, it's easier to grow into something new and get a piece of the action as opposed to being the absolute killer market leader in the one you're in right now. So those offshoots are actually quite valuable from time to time. And then just realistic targets. I think just someone who's sat down and gone, okay, I actually have a realistic view on what my business can achieve. I have a model that shows, what that's going to look like. I understand the numbers, and go from there.